Greetings and welcome to the introduction episode of the concentration unit. This is a unit that is going to take up the majority of our second semester for advanced students. And that may seem a little daunting, but I wanted to start you off with a couple of questions that would make this a little bit easier to begin with. And you'll find those questions in your concentration packet, which is very in-depth, and it's going to help you break things down step by step to make this as easy as possible. And the first question that it asks you on this front page is to list some of the favorite projects that you've ever made. They can even be a two-dimensional piece, but I want to know the reason why it stands out to you. I also want you to list what your favorite pieces were. Was it because of the quality, the subject matter, the reason for making it, the people that you were making it for? So you're going to list out your 4 favorite creative projects that you've ever done. And like I said, it does not have to be 3-dimensional. So if there was a 2-dimensional project that you really enjoyed creating, you should list that here. On the next page, it asks, keeping your list of your best/favorite projects in mind, what do you think you are most skilled at making? And that is an important question because your concentration should focus on the things that you are best at. So you want to take your most skilled areas and apply those to your concentration. So you're going to list 3 areas that you are most skilled in, and this could be even 2-dimensional things. So just listing out the things that you've made in the past that were the most successful might help you kind of realize if there's a pattern there, which areas you're most skilled in. Next, it lists out what a concentration is. It has a full description, and I think that it's really important to talk about what a concentration means. Creating a concentration is intended to provide students with the opportunity to work in the way that most professional artists do, on a body of work that is unified by an underlying idea that has visual coherence. All right, so let me say that again. On a body of work that is unified in an underlying idea. So that means that these pieces all go together because they have one cohesive theme. So that's really what we're working towards with this concentration. This is intended to be a prolonged and focused investigation. It should be something that is of vital interest to the student and that lends itself to the student's way of working. So this should support those areas that you listed above where you said that you were skilled. So you want to make sure you're super interested, and you want to make sure it's something that you are skilled at and able to create successfully. Concentrations should show a clear and focused idea that remains at the heart of the work as the idea is developed. So you should have one idea that you're kind of branching off of as you continue to work on these projects. These works should be engaging in both form and content, evocative, and bring forth an aesthetic response in the viewer. So those are the things that we're looking for with a concentration, but overall we're just looking for a common theme and something that is engaging to you and something that you are going to be successful in creating. So I list a couple of different options for materials that you can use to create this project, because for your concentration you are not limited to just working with clay. You could do a combination of something with clay, or you could choose any of the options that are listed in this portion of your packet just beneath the description of a concentration. Next, I have a whole couple of pages of this packet that are possible themes that you could include for your concentration. So what you're going to do is star or highlight any concentration topic that you have even the slightest amount of interest in. So I'm going to go through and do that step, and I'm going to share some of my interests in these themes. I completed this step of the brainstorm as if I were a student that were completing a concentration that had to have a theme and had to have at least 4 pieces that went together. So first I said a series giving human qualities to common objects, a series of interpretive busts of figure studies that emphasize expression or impression. So for that one, I think it would be really fun to do people's expressions and really trying to emphasize them. Next, a series of vessels that explore incorporating different materials into basic clay form. Embed, weave, and create ruptures in the vessel that can be used after firing to tie the vessel together. So for that one, you could create a ceramic piece that had like rips and like little holes that you could then thread back together, which would be kind of cool. The next one I found interesting was realism to elongation. So taking something that looks real and then like the slow process of it stretching out, I thought sounded cool. Next, a series of woven forms with non-traditional and traditional materials that evolve into objects. Wouldn't that be so cool if you took clay and made it look sort of like it was woven? Like you could even bring in like a cable knit sweater or like different textures of fabric and then have them create objects that they normally wouldn't. Like what if you had a cable knit teapot or something? I don't know, that'd be kind of cool. This page included successful concentration ideas that have already been used in AP studios by students throughout the country in the past. So some of these are a bit more specific. I really liked the evolution of illness idea, especially with the part where it's talking about anatomical body parts that are affected by different diseases. That would be so fun. Oh my gosh. Next, painting friends in different historical time periods through costumes and settings. So you could find like different historical periods that relate to people in your life and then make them in those costumes and settings. Next is the body as a landscape. Oh my gosh, how interesting. Next, wings. How do we fly? Fruit, from their growth on trees through picking, processing, selling, and consumption by people. So for a concentration for this topic, you could do all of those different phases. So you could do like someone picking that fruit, the next piece could be processing, the next piece could be selling, the next piece could be consumption by people. Next, I had insects with a colorful and humorous viewpoint. You could do like really large insects and have them be sort of exaggerated. I liked flowers from realistic evolving to abstract. How interesting. So you could have the first project be a really realistic flower and have the rest of your projects be a slow transition to an abstract version of the first flower. I really like the idea of winged creatures, so drawn in high detail with like moths, bats, bees. So just different creatures that have one thing in common could be something you use for your theme. And cultural costumes would be fun. So it does not have to be made with clay. In fact, you could use found objects or items or things that you have a lot of, even just like paper, to create cultural costumes or any type of costume or outfit. Interpretations of famous fairy tales. Oh my gosh, how fun. So you could take fairy tale ideas and transform them into like little scenes or figurines, or take fairy tales and make them like modern day looking. Glamorized 1940s jewelry. Oh my gosh, you could make that out of clay. You could make them like enlarged so that they were bigger and more interesting to look at. Porches in my neighborhood. I thought that would be kind of fun. Vegetables or food in general. Portraits of the everyday moods of my dog. That would be so much fun for my little Chihuahua. She has so many. After you've selected your favorite possible ideas, we're going to go through and look at some examples that students have already created of what's called a concentration. So we're going to see some pieces that go together with an underlying theme. You can see all of these different examples of concentrations in your packet, but I really like that this first example has a written description of what they were trying to do. And overall, what they're saying is that they were combining the concept of surrealism, so things that are slightly real, but taking them and making them strange or interesting or not quite real, and combining them with everyday objects that you would see in your normal life. I think a really cool example of this is making the earbuds or the headphones with actual ears at the end of them. So they were trying to combine different facial or body parts with an everyday object, which I thought was super interesting. There are many more examples of concentrations in your packet, but another one that I was fairly drawn to was this example where you can really see that the student was focused on the differences between the positive space, so the actual object itself, versus the negative space, so the space above, below, between, within those different objects. And so they were really focused on playing around with the use of both positive and negative space, which is what brought all of these pieces together. And although they are very different from each other, you can still sort of see that they are connected in that way. So they still have one common underlying theme, although the pieces were not super similar to each other. Now that you've seen some examples of other students' work that connects together, you're going to move on to the next page in your packet where you're going to draw out 4 different possibilities for your concentration. And I do only have 4 boxes, but remember that if you do finish more than 4 during this quarter, or if you do finish more than 4 during this semester, you are more than welcome to create more pieces that go along with your concentration. So you are not limited to 4, but 4 is the minimum amount. So you're going to go through, and in each of these rows, you're going to draw out projects that have an underlying theme. And if it's helpful, you can kind of write it up at the top, underneath, or whatever, just make some notes for yourself. But you are going to come up with 4 different ideas for concentrations, and these can just be very simple, basic sketches. After you've completed those 4 possible ideas for your concentration, you're going to narrow them down to your 2 favorite possibilities. Once you've done that, you're going to draw those sketches just a little bit more in depth, and you're going to write out what your idea is for their underlying theme. So you're going to go through and sketch out those projects larger and in greater detail, and you're going to explain what your theme is. Once you have done that step and you have completed your drawings and they have enough detail and you feel good about your 2 possible ideas for this concentration, you're going to flip the page and you're going to look through the elements and principles, and you're going to use these to help enhance your project. So I'm going to break these down so that you have an understanding of how they relate to 3-dimensional projects, and you'll be able to use that knowledge to increase the success of each of your projects that you're doing for your concentration. The first element we're going to cover is line. A mark or area that is significantly longer than it is wide may be perceived as a line. In a 3-dimensional world like clay, line can be shown on the surface of a sculpture by applying decorative or 3D lines to a surface. We also perceive line along edges where 2 areas are treated differently meet. Implied line may also be present in a 3D artwork. This means that some lines are not physically created, they are merely suggested by the artist. The second element is form. Form can be defined as 3-dimensional areas, also called volume or mass. There are many different characteristics of form. The emphasis can be on the area created by the negative space around the form, or it can be on the positive space, or the form itself. Forms can also be static and appear to be still, or dynamic and appear to be moving or changing. The third element is space. In the 3D world, it's important to consider both the space within and around the sculpture. For example, sculptures that contain jutting angles create an impression of dynamic energy and movement exploding into the surrounding space. Large enough pieces can even control the viewer's movement, such as restricting alternate routes or viewing points. The fourth element is scale. Something that's really interesting to consider is that we are accustomed to objects that are life-sized. So when an artist presents a familiar form in an unfamiliar size, our interest is often heightened, for the experience is immediately something out of the ordinary. The fifth element is texture, which basically refers to the surface quality. This can be inviting to the viewer and make them want to touch the surface. Some textures are much less inviting, but nonetheless enhance the intended visual impact of a piece. Artists can also use texture to create contrast between different areas and materials of a sculpture. The first principle of art we're going to discuss is time. Some three-dimensional works move through space and time themselves and are called kinetic sculptures. An example would be a mobile. Some static sculptures can create the illusion of movement, for example, showing a figure in many different poses that suggests movement. Some sculptures are purposefully created with ephemeral materials, such as ice or snow, to be allowed for a fleeting amount of time. The second principle is repetition. One of the basic ways that artists have unified their designs is to repeat a single design element, be it a kind of line, shape, form, texture, value, or color. As the viewer's eye would travel from one part to another, it sees the similarities, and the brain, preferring order to chaos, readily groups them as like objects. The third principle is variety. The companion of repetition is variety, change rather than the sameness through space and time. Variety often takes the form of subtle variations on the same theme. Variety can be expressed through transitions or gradual changes from one state to another. For example, one color may gradually change from one to another, a line may slowly change in character, or a form may dissolve into unfilled space. The fourth principle is rhythm. Repetition and variety in design elements create patterns that are similar to rhythms in music, from the predictable drum beats of a marching band to the swirling rhythms of a romantic symphony to the offbeat intricacies of jazz timing. The same elements, such as line, form, color, may be repeated visually through space, or groupings may be repeated so that the eye picks out recurring patterns, such as small, large, medium, small, large, medium. Such patterns, which may be easily perceived or complex and subtle, create repeated visual accents with space between them, like upbeats and downbeats or waves and troughs. The fifth principle is balance, which refers to the distribution of apparent visual weights so that they seem to offset one another. We subconsciously assign visual weight to a work, and we tend to want the parts to be distributed through the work in such a way that they seem to balance each other. Symmetrical balance is the same on either side of a central point or axis. Radial balance means that the elements are symmetrically arranged around the central point in all directions, and asymmetrical or informal balances means that the weight is dissimilar in areas and they counterbalance each other. The sixth principle is unity. Artists can create pleasing compositions by creating strong attachments between elements within their work. They may physically touch each other, they may be held together by the energy of opposition, or the artist may have arranged the lines of the work, both actual and implied, in such a way that they lead the viewer's eye from one area to another, visually tying the work together. The seventh and final principle is emphasis, or the predominance of one area or element in a design. By its size, position, color, shape, texture, or surroundings, one part of a work may be isolated for special attention, giving a focus or a dramatic climax to the work. When awareness is drawn to a single place, it is called the focal point. Hopefully, the knowledge of understanding the elements and principles and how they apply to a three-dimensional piece of art will be helpful in deciding which of those two ideas you're leaning towards. And once you have decided on your final idea, yay, then you're going to move on to the next page where you are sketching those out just one more time and you're creating your mini models for this step of the project. So this is going to help you solve a lot of problems before you actually get to the final draft version of these projects. I like to make minis from all of the things that I'm creating just because I think it's helpful for my mind to really break down how it's going to look three-dimensionally, so all the way around the project, and that's why we're doing this here. So you're going to draw sculptures or your mini sculptures, you're going to create them just very small. They don't have to be more than a couple inches big, and this will really help you develop your ideas. Once you've done that, you're going to go and answer the questions that are underneath your mini section. So it says, circle the elements that your minis demonstrate. So you're going to go through and circle from line, form, space, scale, texture, time, repetition, variety, rhythm, balance, unity, and emphasis. So you're going to circle the ones that your projects do demonstrate already. Which ones of these elements and principles do you need to work on, and how can you incorporate them into your final sculptures? Next, do your minis show potential for well-informed decision-making and intention? Are your minis original, imaginative, and inventive? Do your minis show engagement with experimentation and/or risk-taking? Are they challenging enough? And did you play it too safe? Next, do your minis show potential to be confident and evocative? Do they engage the viewer with visual qualities? Do your minis show potential for technical competence? Do the materials and media used effectively express your idea? So these are things that you need to think through before moving on to creating your 4 final projects. Now, the next step is to create your project plan for all 4 of your final projects. And remember that this is what you will be working on throughout the semester. So having an in-depth plan is going to be really important in the success that you find with these projects. For each of the plans, you're going to answer the questions on the side. So it says, think it through. Does this piece clearly express your theme? How does it connect? Does this design demonstrate the skills of an advanced student? Where can you add intricate details? Where do you need to hollow this piece out and then color it in so that you don't forget when you're creating it? Which parts of this piece will be created with the clay extruder or the slab roller? And you should be considering, if you have anything that resembles a coil or anything that is flat, you should be using those tools. Next, where can you add texture? What tools will you use to do so? And finally, what steps will you take to make this, and in what order? So those are the things you are thinking through for each of the 4 projects that you are creating. I am so excited to see what you guys choose to do for this unit. I think that it's an excellent opportunity to have to really think through how you can tie these pieces together, and having an underlying theme will really push you to the extreme to make these as successfully as you possibly can. So let's go ahead and get started. Thanks for watching.